ocean is our best resource in the whole United States. And the fact that there's initiatives to clean up this open water has just allowed more areas for us to swim in. Now we're swimming in rivers, and I swam around Manhattan Island, in New York City. Like there's things that people can do now. So open water has really kind of unbridled. It has so many possibilities. So for somebody that does pool swimming, you really can't fathom the distance you're covering because you're just going back and forth, back and forth. But when you're in open water, you swim to that point or you swim there and then you come back and you could see the distance. And it just kind of is very kind of uh, reassuring, but also encouraging because it seems almost unfathomable that you could do it and then you did it. And then it's just kind of leads to more and more distance. So the swim that I did was from the Golden Gate Bridge to the Fisherman Buoy at the Farallon Islands. Now, the Farallons are from the Golden Gate Bridge, 29.7 miles, and only 5 people have swam the other direction from the islands into the Golden Gate Bridge. And I saw the swim the other direction because who swims toward the Shark Island, right? But knowing my strengths, I was able to capitalize on that. And I was able to use the colder water and the distance to the island in my favor. So the other people dove in at the island and it was cold, but then it got warmer as they approached San Francisco, whereas I knew it was going to get colder and I was swimming toward the sharks. Look, I just had to be mentally, physically prepared for this. So I spent a lot of time in the colder water. I had to train for very many hours getting ready for this swim, knowing that the water temperature was going to drop down into the 40s. So it was already starting to warm up in the bay. So I had to kind of find other areas that still had colder water, like going up to the mountains and swimming in Donner Lake. I spent time in the open water out past the Golden Gate Bridge, just out by Point Bonita, where the water temperature can really vary because of the currents out there. And so it was a lot of prep, but I still was not expecting the temperature that we ended up having for some of the swim, which was 43 degrees. And that seemed to me for a long time, but it probably wasn't as long. But it was recorded and there were a lot of upwellings. But the water off the continental shelf right there is really frigid. And so the way the current was when we were approaching the island, that's where that cold water band was. And then as soon as the tide changed, the water temperature raised back up to 50, which seemed really warm to me. But, you know, um, we were almost done. And I didn't want to stop because I didn't want to have to do it again. So I knew I had to get through it because it's hard to push through. It's painful when you swim in that cold. I mean, when you're out in the cold and your hands start freezing, my whole body was doing that. So I had to figure out a way to get through that. So it was kind of mentally challenging, but I just knew I could do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there is all the physical preparation that you spoke about. And you can do that, and you can do that. Maybe you can even double that. But when it comes down to it, it really is perhaps that mental toughness, I think, that allows you to get to the very end because there is just so much that you're having to overcome, Amy.
Yeah.
It's the length of the swim and the environments you're having to go through and
Yeah.
the challenges, both some of them known and prepared for, but so many of them unexpected.
Yeah.
You spoke about, some of the temperature variances.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about that for a second. Again, cold water swimming in the 40s, Saint's wetsuit seems
Mhm.
ridiculous, right? Because I swim in a I surf in a 4-3 or a 5-4 sometimes. When the water temps, drop down to the early 50s, like now we're approaching winter swells, and
Mm-hmm.
people are going to be busting out their thickest wetsuits. But you are there for hours on end, again in a swimsuit, and
Yeah.
you are prepared for like temperatures of a certain kind, swimming in, let's say, alpine lakes and
Mm-hmm.
with other kinds of training. But then the temperature dropped even further. I think it's one of those things which is hard to get one's arms around if one is
Yeah.
not an open water swimmer and surfs in cold water. But I think maybe the listener can just take this thing away that you have pool water. And please ask any, what is the typical temperature in a swimming pool in the
It
U.S.?
varies. Yeah, it varies from if you have a competition pool, it's at 78 degrees,
Yes.
but most swim centers will be in the low 80s.
Wow.
So I know. And I did do a lot of training in the pool to work on my speed and my endurance in other ways. But I mean, you got to be able to compartmentalize. You can't take the whole thing was so big and so unruly and so unmanageable if you look at it in its entirety. But if you could kind of focus on one thing at a time, I mean, my swim was 17 hours. I mean, has anybody really enjoyed even sleeping 17 hours? Very rarely. You wake up sore. That's ridiculous. And you can't eat for 17 hours. There's really nothing you can do pleasurable for that length of time.
That's totally true.
So just wrapping your head around that alone, you can't think about that. You got to kind of break it down. So it's like you go half an hour at a time. I could manage to the next half an hour, and I can manage to the next, and I can manage to the next. And you kind of just string it together. And then as far as the variables, like the temperature dropping that was unexpected, I couldn't think about it. I just had to figure out, at least when I'm swimming, I'm generating heat. When you're surfing, there's a lot of paddling,
Yes.
and then you wait, and then you catch a wave, and then you got to grind it back out. And then by the time you get back out in the lineup, you actually got your heat again, but then you're sitting waiting for the wave again. Then the
True.
temperature drops.
True.
So I think that that's one of the advantages of just a constant, steady pace is just that you keep generating heat.
Right.
But honestly, like if you just break things down into manageable pieces, you can kind of accomplish a lot of tactics and skills that you don't realize you have. That's kind of how I worked it. I just had to have a good crew around me of my really good training partners and friends. And I knew that my life was in their hand, literally. When I asked them to be on my swim, there was, the reality that we're going into shark water and anything could happen. And I don't think that we all appreciated the gravity of that ask until the swim was over and we all like were really overwhelmed by that, there could have been a shark issue. There could have been, I mean, I passed a few carcasses of seals,
Wow.
half-eaten seals. Yeah, the
Wow.
captain, I know, I didn't know about it, thank God, but the captain, he's a fisherman out there, so he knows what to look for. He's looking for bait balls and what to avoid. But before one of my pace swimmers jumped in the water, because I had 3 pace swimmers that swam an hour at a time, the captain called him up and pointed, and my friend Kirk looked out and he goes, "Oh, well, a half-eaten seal." And he goes, "Yeah, a shark just ate it. I mean, that's fresh." I said, "Well, that shark ate. We're good." Jumped in the water and swam with me. And the captain was never so unbelievably humbled by that comment, but it was true. Like, that's the shark you don't have to worry about anymore. Had already eaten. So, he got in the water with me. And he couldn't really say no because he knew he was there to help me. And that was the ask. So we were very grateful that nothing bad happened. So 2 days before my swim, the original captain and boat had to back out and couldn't. provide my trip and my event. He had another booking that he couldn't get out of. So I had to last minute scramble and find another pilot and
Oh,
captain. And so my husband was a deputy harbor master down in Half Moon Bay and knew Chad Dahlberg, who his boat is called Pacific Rival, and he's a fisherman. He has a beautiful boat. It's got great space on it, and he's a very squared away captain, very trustworthy. And he also swam when he was younger. So he was game to try it. Salmon season was not allowed for commercial fishing. So he actually had the time available. So 2 days before the swim, I had to secure him. And that was a little bit of a challenge. But at the same time, I think it was actually the best thing that could have happened because
oh,
it took the pressure off of certain aspects of the swim and we had to pivot and just make this work. So I was really grateful that he was available and willing. He really wanted to do a good job. And the reality is, his boat being so big, when it's at a trolling pace, when we were with the current, like when we first started, it was perfect. For the first 6 hours, we were going side by side. It was perfect speed. I was able to match what he was trolling at. But then the current stopped, the tide changed, and the swim began. And we kind of knew that was going to happen, but we underestimated how often we'd have to shift in and out of gears because of my speed and the current that was out there. But he remained on the helm and just worked it, and we worked it together, and it was successful. I mean, it was really amazing what he had to do to make it happen. So I was really grateful that I had every time that I stopped for a feed, I'd have one of my crewmates drop a pin. The other crewmate that I had who was working with the instrumentation would look at the line that we had snapped to get to the island to make sure we were right on target. And we would have to adjust, and the captain and my three, all three of them had to work together to keep me on task and right on target for the island. So if you looked at the line that my swim had posted, it was very straight, which is unbelievable with the amount of current out there.
yeah. The team rose up to the occasion,
Yes.
and maybe they were also moved by. You will be modest and say that this was a team effort. Um, and maybe it was. It was certainly required, but I think the fact that you had the talent and the gumption to go after this one is incredible.
It's the team is really essential. You could train and be ready all yourself, but you can't be successful if you don't surround yourself with the proper team. So I have to give them credit that I could not have accomplished it without them.
Absolutely, credit goes to them. We just went over, like, let's say, one aspect of the challenge that you had to overcome. Um, let's actually go over trying to help us understand what are some of the things you had to overcome. So let's go into the known challenges first, right? When you are accomplishing or looking out to accomplish this swim, what were some of the known challenges that you were prepared for? And then I would love to kind of just maybe take one step into some of the other unknowns that came up.
Sure. So the known challenges are the migratory pattern of the shark. So typically, I mean, let's start with the big one, literally. Um, there are less sharks in May through beginning of July. They migrate. Now there are known sharks that reside at the islands year round. So the islands are never without sharks, but there's less of them between April and the middle of July. So that was my first window that I had to work within. The second objective and issue was the right tide and current to start the swim. So I knew that I would be between 15 and 18 hours for me and my swimming ability to make it to the island if everything went smooth. So I had to kind of march back and find tides and currents that allowed me to reach the island midday. Well, that presents the next challenge, which is weather systems. So we marched out two specific tide windows, and the way that the weather system was queuing up, it blew out the first one with wind. The day that I actually ended up swimming, which was the 11th of May, wasn't even on our radar because I was going to have to jump about 3 in the morning, which puts me right at the island at dinner time for the sharks. Because typically the predatory pattern of a shark is also dawn and dusk. And so the 11th was our least favorite day to have to do this swim in the time frame that we had kind of allotted and my crew availability. But the weather was perfect on that day. So we had to go. And I had to reckon with the fact that we were going to arrive at the Shark Island around the typical predatory dinner time for the shark.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and then another unexpected event was when I was getting ready to jump in the water at the Golden Gate Bridge. We call into vessel traffic so that they can pay attention of all the ships coming and going in the shipping lanes here for San Francisco. It's the third biggest shipping port on the West Coast. So they have to know all the comings and goings, and we were going to be bordering the shipping lane. So it was out of respect that we let them know we were swimming. And we called in, and vessel traffic had us repeat the coordinates starting and ending location 3 times because they didn't believe it. And then the Coast Guard pipes in to also clarify information. And then the ship that was due to leave port asked if we could hold up 45 minutes till they passed us, because otherwise I'm in their way. I mean, honestly, it took 5 years to execute this swim. Each year there was something that did not come together. So for us to not have to wait another year, we had to go on a day that was not the most desirable, but still could provide us with the availability to get the swim done. So as I was talking with my captain, and as we got held back waiting for that ship to pass and had to jump 45 minutes later, which definitely was going to put us right at the island around sunset, my captain said he was less worried about sunset, where the sharks typically feed, than he was if it was dark, because he says he's out there fishing at the island and knows that's when the sharks actually hunt. So he was grateful I was on the boat at sunset that day. So that was one of the biggest challenges. Yeah. I just couldn't gear up for it again. So I really wanted to execute it. And I'm so grateful it all came together. So despite those unforeseen issues that we could not control, we made it work. And that's the bottom line: is you always have a challenge, you have to pivot, you have to figure it out. And that's kind of why it was successful, because not only myself, but everybody was committed to making sure that this would go and this would happen and that we can make this successful.
Amy, you certainly made it successful, and sounds like the planning and also the bets that you made in concert with your team, those bets paid off. Let's just zoom, yeah, let's just zoom in on
Mhm.
the whole planning around sharks, right? And you have spent more time in the vicinity of great whites off the coast here than most people,
Mhm.
because many people may have been in boats and maybe they spend time in boats or maybe doing other activities, but being in your swimsuit in the open water, swimming through some of the most shark infested waters known to man. Because educate us, Amy, on what did you learn about sharks? What did you learn which both made you respect what you were getting into versus perhaps what made you feel some sense of, I don't know, reassurance that they're not out there to eat you? Like you said, in many ways, you are this uh, regular, everyday, hardworking nurse, family person. So you were not looking for a suicidal mission. You
Right.
took many things into account going
Yes.
into the swim. So educate us, because I think in popular perception, sharks, to Steven Spielberg and Jaws, sharks sometimes get demonized,
Yeah.
and there are known risks and maybe risks that are blown out of proportion. So anyway, educate us.
Yeah. I think honestly, we as humans don't want to be the victim. Like, we don't have very many predators that actually attack humans. And so it is a natural fear having a
Mm,
shark that has a history of attacking on certain occasions. But if you really think about the number of sharks and the number of swimmers in shark areas, if this were to be a target species, we were the food chain, there would be a lot more attacks. And there's not. I think a lot of what happens is the shark is confused by what we are, not aware, and they don't have the ability of touching something. They touch with their mouth. And sometimes that's a problem because they have very sharp teeth and it can be quite devastating. So I had to educate myself on just the natural patterns of the shark. I spoke to David McGuire, who's the shark steward here in San Francisco. I've like read just amazing volumes of antidotes and reports about sharks. I read The Devil's Teeth. I kind of really had to kind of reckon with a lot of the reality that I was going to be in their water. I was actually infesting their water. That's their habitat. So I had to be very respectful of what my mission was. So the advantage that I had was I'm human in just a regular bathing suit. I think the wetsuit makes some humans look more like a seal. So I feel that my body being more exposed actually was more clear to them that I was not a seal. And I purposely wore a black and white suit because it has like markings similar to an orca. And orca is one of the species that actually hunts shark. Yes. So that was what I used as a defense mechanism because that really, I didn't have anything else on my body. And I had next to me 5 miles from the island, my kayaker actually had a shark shield. So it's a 6 foot long electronic probe that skin divers and scuba divers wear in shark inhabited waters when they're diving. And I couldn't wear it on my body because it would make my swim disqualified because it would be an adjunct. So we actually, my husband devised uh, some dive weights to put the shark shield down several feet below the kayak, and he also designed a kind of a front that the actual probe went into so that it stayed always going one direction and not swiveling all over the place. So he had to kind of modify that a little bit. So he felt confident that that was going to provide some safety. Um, and all the studies for this particular shark shield have shown that it is a very good shark deterrent. But honestly, I couldn't see anything because there was red tide in the water and anything
Oh,
past my fingertips was just murky. So that actually was not great. But at the same time, I don't think I want to see what was down there anyway. I think that would have probably been a little bit too much. So the fact that we had the shield and I had that natural bio protection of the red tide. I think that was the best. I mean, I felt the sharks and you surf, and if you get that weird shark feeling, they have actually statistically proven that that's 90% accurate.
wow.
Yeah, because the shark cues into your electrical system. So your heart rate, it feels your heart rate. And so some of how it judges what you are is by the cadence of your natural biorhythm, which is your heartbeat. So my whole goal was to not have the same heartbeat as a seal. So that was interesting. Yeah.
You just dropped so much knowledge on us. I have surfed, and many of my friends have surfed in San Francisco for a long time, and so has your husband. I have perhaps never felt that sixth sense, maybe that there is a shark in the waters. Though I have spoken with some even surfers on the show, like Dr. Reniker, and he's talked about like
Yep.
shark sightings. And maybe it's just a question of like time, like, and maybe I just haven't spent enough time to feel that. You felt that your husband has
Mhm.
spent a lot of time. He felt that. How do you know, by the way, that that is a, let's say, a shark that you're sensing in the water and not, let's say, a more benign animal like a dolphin? Because I've seen dolphins. I
Yeah.
don't know if I felt dolphins the same way, but you see dolphins, you feel reassured. How do you know that
Yeah.
what you were feeling was different?
I've swam a lot and actually you surfed at Lindemar. So I swim at Lindemar occasionally. And Lindemar can be sharky. So from Crespi down to the north part of the beach, they have had shark sightings. And one day I was swimming with four friends of mine, and we had a dolphin circling us, very tight circles, very tight circles, very tight circles underneath us, all around us.
Oh
And
wow.
when I looked at my friend, she said, "We need to get going." And I said, I agree with you. I think there's a shark. So we didn't see it, but that dolphin definitely knew what something was up. And we both had that feeling. So I know that that's one of the closest encounters that I had, but I didn't see the shark. But it's each animal that you see in the water has a different feeling. So I can hear dolphin, I can hear whale because we have silicone earplugs. And so I can feel their vibrations. Sharks are fish, so they don't put off the same
Oh,
impulses. So it's just that spidey sense you get that, that kind of is a little bit like you're creeped out. And then you kind of have that knowledge that there's something else out here. But they don't necessarily want to eat human. We don't taste good. So I think the sharks that are the most concerning are the juveniles that are transitioning from eating fish to eating seals. They're hungry, they get too overwhelmed, they waste a lot of energy hunting. Those are the ones that are really scary. And at the Farallon Islands, they refer to that group of sharks as the rat pack. So they actually live from the south part of the island around the back. And in Fisherman's Bay, where I swam into, there are several resident female sharks that are ginormous, like
oh,
18 foot to 20 feet. Like they are very old and they're very savvy. They all have different personalities, like the urchin divers know of them. And they mess with them a little bit, like, might bump them or things like that, swim close to them, but they're not going to harm them. They're just checking them out, letting them know that they're there and they know that you're there. So our whole goal was to approach this fisherman, cove so that we would be where the females were. because they wouldn't have wasted their time or energy on attacking me, because they would have looked at me, I'm a splashing human with a yum yum yellow kayak. Around dinner time, they probably thought we were just trying to punk them. They were like, "What Shark Week filming now?" Like, what segment is this? Because we're not going to fall for that one. So I was hoping that that's what we were going with. And we just stayed away from the rat pack because they're hungry. They're like hungry teenage boys. They eat your refrigerator. Like, same thing. They're hungry. So they'll try.
Sure. I mean, they're hungry and they're curious.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was just praying that we just nailed the swim from the right direction.
Right. I have heard this theory over the years that it has less, yeah, San Francisco has less incidents because we have a more mature white shark population, which, and that's why, they are mature and they can distinguish,
Yeah.
prey from seals and others from, benign creatures like humans. Because also the other thing about white sharks is when they take a bite, it's not like maybe getting bitten by, let's say, a bull shark or other or tiger sharks. Like those can also be very injurious. But
Mhm.
if a white shark really does decide to mess with you, they are so big and powerful, you don't really stand a
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like if you hear of a story of somebody, getting out with like just like a lost leg or something, I think that
Mhm.
person was very lucky, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think your point is that we have mature sharks in San Francisco and we have a very robust food chain. So we have, like, since the 1970s, when they made it illegal to hunt for the great whites and catch them, we have seen an explosion of population of the great white. And also, there's been a lot of protective measures protecting the sea lions, the seals, the elephant seals, which are their typical food source. So we have seen a lot of that population also like proliferating. So there's a lot of their known food available. And you're right. Like if they were to attack a human, I mean, they may not mean to, but they usually bite and release. Whereas a bull shark or a tiger shark will just keep eating because they eat tires and they eat tin cans and they eat anything. So great whites are typically a much more selective, hunter. So I do think that we're lucky in our area that we don't have very many incidents. We have a very, robust food chain established, but it's something that we need to be cognizant of because you don't want to enter surfing in a bait ball. Like you just don't.
Yeah,
Like you don't want
yeah.
to put yourself at risk. And I think we have not been aware of such things, but down in Southern California, they've had more incidents where sharks have bitten humans because the human wasn't paying attention to the signs like a bait ball or a lot of turbulence or a lot of seal activity and not aware that they should avoid that. So I think maybe we're smarter up here.
Yeah. Well, uh, I mean, maybe well, you are certainly smarter. I mean, you were prodigious in your planning. I mean, you talked about the shark challenge, which is huge. What are
Mhm.
some of the other known challenges that you took into account and planned for?
Well, the reality is it's a 30-mile swim. So the amount of training that I had to do to accomplish such a feat really takes a lot. And I had to train before I went to work. I had to train many hours on the weekends. My husband, thank goodness, partnered with me to make sure that I was supported and he understood that. But, I was getting up at like 3:30 in the morning before work to go swim a few hours and then go to work and then come home and I'd go to bed at like 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. I was exhausted. And he had to kind of roll with that. And then all weekend long, I'd get my really long swims in. So a lot of commitment from my family, not being able to meet up with my family as regularly because they live out of state as I wished because of my commitment to training. Or if I did go, I had to be training when I was there. So that's something that I think people that do endurance sports have to really balance that challenge. And that's
Sure.
something that's unexpected if you're not an endurance athlete that has to commit to that much training.
Well, I suppose your family understood, or maybe they didn't understand really the enormity of what you were about to undertake, but they somehow gave you that latitude that
Yeah.
either Amy is not going to be here for Thanksgiving, or she's here, but she will disappear from like 3 a.m. to some other hour because she's not sleeping like everybody else. She's in the pool and
Mhm,
she's putting the literally the miles in.
mhm,
Absolutely, lots of challenges and planning that we can't all go over in this episode. But Amy, take us first to that moment. I want to kind of go into the swim a little bit more.
mhm.
You put all of this preparation in, you all the information, all the planning, the date alignment. You are about to enter the water. You're wearing. So take us to that day. How did that day transpire? Time of day, weather, and how were you feeling
Yeah,
when
well,
you set out?
yeah, so I know this is gonna probably shock you, but I had to work a 10-hour shift before I swam. So I finished my shift at 6:30. I came home and I ate pasta. I went and put myself to sleep. I was sleeping by 8:15 and I slept till midnight. So I woke up after 4 hours of sleeping. And my crew member John was here at my house. He met me here so we could drive into the city together. And my girlfriend Jody was land crew, so she drove us into the city. So I literally had 4 hours of sleep after working a shift, and the weather was so bizarre. So that was the night that we had the aurora borealis. But in San Francisco, till literally 4 a.m., there was this fog that was so thick and heavy. And I couldn't even see the
Uh-huh.
Golden Gate Bridge when we were underneath it. I couldn't even see the lights. I kept asking the captain, like, we're here? Like, I had no idea where I was. And so we lit up the boat. I got myself ready to go. And after we waited for the tanker to pass, he said, "Go." And I had to jump in the water, but I literally had no idea where I was. I kind of knew which direction we were going to head because he was aimed that way. And I just had to start swimming. And literally from that moment, we jumped in the water. There's this bubble of fog, and it followed us all the way to the island. Like it was absolutely bonkers. You couldn't even see 100 meters out, 100 meters up. It was all gray, and it went from dark, like night, to lighter gray when it was daylight, back to a darker gray as sun was setting. Like it was that like benign. I had no idea where I was. I couldn't even see the island. When I touched the buoy, I could barely see the outline of
Oh,
the island, which was
wow.
200 feet from my like the buoy was like less than 200 feet to shore. So anyway, it was bizarre. But the reality was that it probably made it easier because I was in a sensory bubble and I just had to keep going. So it was a little bit nuts. And that was kind of what it was about. And from behind when our boat left, I have an amazing photo that someone took of the Golden Gate Bridge with the aurora borealis, and it was literally an hour after we had left. The fog had cleared. It just followed me out to the island. So, you're welcome. I took the fog with us, but it was a little bit crazy, and that was the weirdest experience that happened. with the actual weather system that we were not expecting. So that was kind of funny. Yeah. I mean, like, honestly, like, we just had that fog bubble the whole way, and it was so nuts. And then at dawn, because it was lighter gray, I looked up and there was these birds that were flying in a very erratic pattern. And I yelled up to my crew, "What kind of birds are those?" Because they looked weird. They were bats. There was bats out in the middle of the ocean, like we were 10 miles offshore. I
Wow.
know, it was so bizarre. So, like, we had the weirdest things. I thought that was the universe telling me I was batshit crazy, which I loved. I laughed at that for a long time. So that was pretty funny.
I
Like,
feel, yeah, I just feel very ill-informed when it comes to my knowledge of the animal world. I did not know that there were bats over open water. I thought bats lived in land and caves and
yeah, in
other.
caves. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I have no idea. Apparently, my crew said there was some moths that were flying and the bats must have followed the moths, but it was up and one of the bats landed on the boat that we were on and stayed coiled up in the coil of line that they had like for the boat when we tie
Sure.
off at the dock. It
Sure.
stayed with us the whole time until we went back to Half Moon Bay to swim. It was hilarious. I mean, I got a video of it. It's so weird. I know. They landed on my crew. They were everywhere, all over the boat. And the captain said he's been out in the waters for 20 plus years and had never seen anything like
Wow.
that. Yeah. It was funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Bats coming to bless your swim.
I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, you know? They're also misunderstood.
They
They're
also
pre-
misunderstood. On the subject of animal encounters, let's see, we have sharks, we had bats. I'm wondering if there was any other nature phenomena which, on the contrary, maybe felt like rejuvenating. Maybe it gave you sort of this lease for life when you were
Mhm.
so exhausted, confused, exhausted, disoriented, and maybe there's some signs from the natural world which were encouraging you to keep moving.
Yeah, there were these seals when we got close to the island. They were playing and jumping and leaping all behind me and around me. And they were delightful because they're so playful and so just hydrodynamic. And they leap out of the water, they swim underneath you, they swim around and they're so fluid. And yeah, that was very exciting. I loved watching them. And that was the highlight of my swim. My crew did see a blue whale and they saw a few humpbacks. I didn't see
Okay,
them.
sure.
I could hear the rumbling of the noise that they can make underwater, but I
Yeah.
couldn't see them. And so that was the only other like big animals. The jellyfish, I wouldn't say were giving me a leash for life, but they certainly made me know I was alive because they zapped. I'd have to peel them off my face. So they were not friendly, but you know, they were there and that's their water, so had to work with that.
When these seals were playing around you, did that thought ever strike you that, wherever seals are close to you, you can also have sharks trying to find seals?
Yeah, yeah, of course. Like I was
Okay.
wondering if they were leading me to dinner. I'm not you know, if
Yeah.
that was like the main dish. I don't know. But at the same time, what I was more excited about was that I must be closer to shore because
Yeah.
they don't necessarily hang out in the middle of the ocean. They like to be
Yeah.
nearer to land so they could kind of take a break and dry off and warm up. So I was more excited about that. I
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
kind of put the shark thing out of my head, you know. It was back
Sure.
there, but
Sure. I have this fun question to ask you. I did not know enough about open water swimming, at least up close and personal, maybe in a media friendly way until that movie about Diana Nyad and her swim from Miami to Cuba came out. So exemplary. And I hope you won't mind this question, but I'm guessing you have been perhaps been asked about this before. Again, for the everyday person, can you maybe compare and contrast on some of those things that are different about what you accomplished and what Diana had to face in her swim?
Yeah, the first and foremost is that she had an incredible swim. I mean, the distance alone, the water temperature being hot, I think is a disadvantage. And also the jellyfish were just horrendous and she reacted to them. That's
Yes.
why she had to wear that jellyfish suit. I mean, honestly, most people are most worried about sharks in open water, but it's actually the jellyfish that are the bigger issue because they're in all waters and they're really challenging and they have terrible jellyfish in all waters. So that is actually a bigger challenge. As far as Diana Nyad goes, she also had several attempts before she was successful. So I didn't even get a chance to start my swim, but it was 5 years. She had attempted it 3 other times before she was successful on her fourth. So a lot of that dedication and retraining and ramping back up and having to gear back up for a huge swim, I can say is very similar because we both had to share that challenge of having to do it again. And I would say that honestly, like the amount of time and dedication is very similar. Our challenges being cold water versus warm water, they both have their issues. You know, I have swam open water in warm water, and I find that that's harder for me. So I
Wow.
respect that. Yeah, I did the Maui Nui channel, so they're from Maui, you swim to Molokai, from Molokai to
Mhm.
Lanai, Lanai back to Maui. So they're about 12 miles each route and you do 'em one a day. So, but I was horribly impacted by the heat of the air and the water. So I think that challenge alone is just unbelievable.
Hang on, hang on. You're saying like
Yeah.
swimming in Hawaii or off the waters of Hawaii is
Yeah.
harder,
Yeah.
maybe in some ways, than swimming in the cold Pacific?
Yeah, for me, definitely for me. I know not for everybody, but
Mm.
I found that being overheated was worse for me than being cold, if that makes sense.
I see, sure.
So,
Now
mhm,
you talked about the auto regulation that happens, right? Because you're constantly
yeah,
moving and you're generating so much heat over
mhm,
such a long time, and maybe the cold water. Yeah,
it
so
supports
for
that.
people who are listening and they are, stymied by the idea of even spending a couple of minutes in cold water, I guess the idea is not to spend a couple of minutes, but to spend like at least what 30 minutes or something until your body acclimates and learns to uh, thrive in that
Exactly.
in the
Yeah. And honestly, it doesn't even take 30 minutes. It literally can be a matter of 5 minutes. Most people, when they spend time in the ocean or the water of any sort, they play around. And after 5 or 6 minutes, they're kind of done playing and then they stand still. So a lot of that is idle time. And that's where your body gets cold again. So literally 5 minutes is all you need to get going. And then you really warm up.
there is such a narrow band of um, athletes who endeavor to do these ultra long open water swims of this kind. I'm wondering, did you ever consult with maybe Diana Nayad or other athletes and maybe exchange notes, maybe get inspiration, maybe share some learnings of your own?
Yeah. So the open water swim community is actually quite collaborative and supportive. So one of my biggest mentors and one of my best friends is Evan Morrison, who actually put together the open water swim database as well as runs Marathon Swim Federation. And actually will sanction the swims and like review all the data and ensure that the swim was executed appropriately before they actually post the swim has successfully been accomplished. So he and I trained together for many years until he recently moved to Australia and now has a family of his own. But I feel so lucky that I had a lot of his guidance and his support. So I was able to kind of learn. And then my biggest supporter and just hero in the open water swim community is Sarah Thomas. She is, bar none, the ambassador to our sport. She's humble, she's approachable, yet she swam 4 back-to-back English channels after
Mm.
fighting breast cancer.
Wow.
And she is now like, she's still superhuman in so many regards, but she's been coaching a lot of athletes, and she'll consult me if she's got an athlete that has unique challenges that I also experience. Like, I can't take the nutrition that she can take. I have to approach things differently because, but I also am in a totally different wheelhouse of cold water. And I also have friends that do ice swimming, and so I consult them. And because the end of my swim was almost an ice mile because of the temperature of the water was 6 degrees Celsius.
Oh
But
gosh.
I mean, honestly, that was at the end of my big channel swim. And that was just mind blowing for the world. So that was kind of fascinating. But I was prepared for that because of a lot of the support that I get from my swimmer friends from all over the world. So I think it's just been a great thing. I did hear from Diana Nyad after my swim, and she was so proud because she was also an older woman competing and completing her swim, and really had a lot of respect in that way. So I felt very honored to have had her reach out to congratulate me, and that was really nice. So,
Uh,
but it's just great. Our community is so open, and that's what's great. We don't judge. We like use people's wheelhouses and celebrate them, because I think that that's been the biggest thing that the open water community has gathered, is that all of us have a unique talent and we can help one another. So we might as well work together
yeah.
so we can
Yeah.
all accomplish things.
Yeah. I mean, all of, yeah, a small, very niche um, community where nobody really understands. I mean, you guys, forgive my language, but you guys are kind of insane and unique in a way.
Yeah.
I'm curious, was there perhaps one piece of advice you can think of that you got from Sarah or from others, that not of a technical nature, but something that they shared with you, their hard earned experience doing epic things where you're like, okay, when you're in the water, maybe that helped you in some deep way.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from all of the people that I've consulted is that there's a point in the swim where your body is trying so hard to convince you to stop, because one little ache or pain can magnify and all of a sudden takes over the full portion of your brain. And it could be that you're nauseous. It could be that your shoulder really hurts. It could be that you're not tolerating your feeds. And you've got to figure out a way to push through. And each individual athlete has their own unique way of doing that. But sometimes hearing how they do it is funny because it gives you another tool in your tool belt to pull out when you're in that spot where your body is telling you you need to stop. You're not able to finish this. There's so many more reasons to stop than keep going. You could pull that tool belt and pull that new
Mm.
tool out and try it and see how it works. And if you could just get yourself through a few more minutes, it really makes the difference. Like Sarah Thomas's big one that is my takeaway that I tell everybody is never make a final decision when it's dark, because a lot of our swims we have to swim at night. And
Correct.
that's the hardest challenge because you really can't see anything. There's so many unknowns under that water. But for you to make a decision to quit at night should never be entertained, because as soon as the light comes,
Mm.
you get rejuvenated and you can push through. So I've had several swimmers that have wanted to quit at night. And I keep telling them our rule was and still is, we do not make a decision during the night.
I see. I'm
And that was
wondering,
huge.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, swimming, I'm not a swimmer, and swimming at night seems so absolutely daunting. But using this one funny analogy from the world of rock climbing, when I'm climbing up a wall and it gets dark, and I haven't done this too many times, the one thing that does happen is it tends to narrow my focus,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because if I'm super tired and I have many pitches to go, and I can see through a clear sky much higher, it just seems so much more overwhelming because I'm like, oh my god, I have so much more to climb.
Love it.
Yeah, it's because you can only see as far as the headlamps allow,
Yep.
right? So one is only immersed in problem solving for that
Yes.
little bit of wall space. So that happens. The other thing that happens usually, at least with some sports when you're climbing, sounds quieten down. So let's say you're climbing in Yosemite during the day, you can kind of hear the muffled din of
Mhm.
the the cars and the traffic and maybe even other climbers and maybe you know birds and whatnot. But at night, everything seems to just completely come to a silent thump.
Mhm.
So sometimes, like climbing at night, if one overcomes that fear of being in the dark, it allows one to focus on the task at hand.
Yes, that's exactly how I approach that. It's so nice to hear you resonate that, because when you are swimming at night, same thing. You can only control what's right in front of you. And I find it really zen like, because you have to get into a rhythm, you have to get into a flow, and you have to be trusting with what's going on with what you can see. And it's just amazing. I actually find it distressing sometimes swimming in the day because I there's too much stimulus. So I
Yeah.
prefer the night. It's beautiful, but I am captivated. Sorry, my dog's barking at me. I'm captivated by just climbers in general. I when I saw Dawn Wall,
Ah,
and a
yeah.
like I watched K2. I have like watched all these climbing movies. I am obsessed. But Alec Hornhold was articulating kind of how he goes into that space to get ready for, his free solo.
Yeah.
And I looked at my husband and he's like, I get it. I get it now. I mean, like he just spoke for my soul. It's just like how you were speaking when you're
Yeah.
focusing at night and all you could see and control is right in front of you. And, your senses are heightened, yet there's more quiet and more
Mm.
internal resonation. I think it's just the most magical space to be in when you're doing something of this nature.
What would be amazing is if I could ever get, let's say, you and maybe Alex or Tommy Caldwell or maybe some other like climbing badasses, and maybe get, let's say, an ultra running badass, again running through the night, in the
Mhm.
Sierras, and get you guys together and have you talk about some of these experiences, because I can't, as even as a climber, I can't quite relate to what those people do. I can only do that in like this very uh, tiny slice. But hearing you guys exchange mind meld would be would be
Oh
really
my
really good.
God. I agree. I would be 100% in on that, because I think that there's just a different space. We just have to go deeper. So you have this slice, but you do still have that whole pie you could dive into. You just don't know how deep you can go.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing when you kind of can tap into that and you know that you could trust things to that nature. And it flows in such a natural sort of way. But I definitely think like climbing has a lot to do with cadence and with like rhythm and strength. And I'm just captivated by it. Like honestly, like I seriously watch like all these climbing shows all the time. I'm obsessed. And I'm kind of fearful of heights, but I know where you go to have to do that. Like I just know you have to just take a deep breath and you don't overwhelm yourself by thinking of the whole thing. You like focus on little bits at a time, ship it away.
Yeah, yeah.
Love it.
I sense that the admiration is very mutual. One kind of question I wanted to ask you is, so a lot of people, they watched Diana Nann's movie, and one
Mhm.
image that kind of stuck with me at least was Diana slurping down pasta. Jodie Foster feeding her, in the movie, pasta as she's upside down, taking a fueling break. I know that you have this remarkable ability to make your calories last. But Amy, what were you feeding on through this long swim?
Yeah. So I use a product that's no longer being produced. So I have this coveted supply of Carbo Pro. And Carbo Pro is a carbohydrate that's a quick release that you can mix with any product and it takes on the taste of that. So it's kind of tasteless. But I mixed my Carbo Pro with chicken bone broth. So it had a high protein content, had a little bit of fat, and it tasted, whether it be cold or warm, like chicken soup. So it was brilliant. And then the solid foods that I ate were mashed potatoes that were quite watered down with more butter
Mm,
for the fat to prolong the uptake of the carbohydrate. And I love peaches. So peaches were, and the syrup just cut the taste of the salt on your tongue. So they were delicious. And then I was hungry at one point because, like, that doesn't really fill you. I wanted a granola bar. So I had a granola bar. But I mean, honestly, I tried to keep it really simple. I had water so I could have
mm,
hydration, and I had hot chocolate when it was colder water so
mm,
I could have a quick sugar. And I love Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is magic. If anything goes sideways, give me a Coke, and that just cheers me up because it gives you a quick sugar.
mm.
I know it can peak you and kind of spike it a little bit, but I always try to like keep another like layer of either fat or fiber of some sort to hold that carbohydrate so it doesn't peak too high. So, I mean, I'm pretty mindful about all of those nutritional aspects, but I really liked my Carbo Pro with the chicken bone broth. That was
Sure.
magic. Worked well.
Amazing. Well, that product is no longer available, but
I know it sucks. I have to research some more. I'm a little
yeah,
it's a little daunting because there's so many out there. There's several that I intend to try this winter. So we'll see which one I land on.
sure. But I will say that this may have been the most beneficent use of Coca-Cola that
Yes.
I have ever heard about. I have not heard a single good thing about Coca-Cola. I'm sorry. But this might be, but maybe the lesson is, hey, unless you are embarking on something close to what you have done, Amy,
Mhm.
please do not drink Coke. It rots teeth.
Oh, I know that. But if you talk to any ultra marathon runner,
True,
guaranteed they
true,
will drink
true,
Coke. They drink
true,
solid Coke.
true.
It's a quick pick me up. But yeah, I don't drink it often. I just reserve it for those
Yeah,
special events that I need it.
yeah.
And I learned it from an ultra marathon runner. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so if you watch like marathons, they will have a station where there's carbonated sodas and
Sure,
typically it's Coke.
sure,
So
sure. Yeah,
it's pretty funny. I
amazing,
know.
amazing. Um, let's talk about a bit of the physical and mental preparation and maybe what we can learn from you, Amy. Actually, let's start with the mental first. So, or maybe I will let you choose. We want to learn about some of the you spoke about some of the long swims that you did in preparation, the many years of planning and waiting. Anything else you want to share about the physical preparation, and then where mental toughness and how you got ready came into play as well?
Yeah. So physically, I think that's much more straightforward because there's more of a math to it. There's more of like, okay, if I'm going to accomplish a 30-mile swim, I have to be swimming 30 miles a week. By this point, then I have to crank it up a little bit more to maybe 40 miles a week, about 6 weeks out. Then you taper it down, and there's more of a science to it. So it's just more about mentally getting ready to execute that cadence of training because it doesn't mean that you do it at a slower pace. It means you swim at a fast pace, that you swim hard, that you swim long, and you have to diversely challenge yourself. So I would say that the physical preparation is much more, you could plot it out and map it out so much easier. But the reality is, the mental preparation is kind of what makes or breaks people. So I will say that professionally, I have the best prep for mental toughness. I mean, I would be working, trying to save a child's life at the bedside and fighting so hard to make that happen. And then to shift gears, take care of my other patient who's actively peacefully needing to die. And how do I meet that family in that space? And how do I take care of the patient in that space? And I have to shift gears so many times. And then the next minute, I'm admitting a brand new patient and with an unknown diagnosis of something. And how do you handle that? I mean, when you're working in pediatrics, you don't have one patient, you have the patient and you have the family. So you
Mm,
don't, you have to learn how to sift through and deal with that, but be present and available. So I
mm.
think my whole profession led me up to needing and being available to meet this mental state that I had to go into because
Wow.
I had to know about the sharks, but I had to put them in the back of my mind, but they were still there. Then I had to know about other things and, other challenges, but deal with them one at a time, but still remain present. So I think that the mental toughness is, if somebody can wrangle with that, they've actually accomplished the most incredible aspect to their feat. That if you could just grapple with that and keep a cool level head, you've really accomplished a lot. I've crewed a lot for people. I've seen people melt down, have, crying and not able to finish, and then they pull themselves together. And that's the type of swimmer I thought was the hardest challenge, and they overcame that. That's amazing. So I really learned a lot from actually helping a lot of other people. And so I think that all of the events that I did leading up to this swim prepared me in much more of a mental capacity than I had
Sure.
previously imagined. Yeah.
That is remarkable, and maybe the most unorthodox way I could have thought about. That was not the answer.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds so powerful, but again, it seems amazing at your ability to take lessons from your day to day,
Mhm.
apply that while you were facing mountains of your own. I'm wondering if there is something you can share with us where you were again, let's say, down to, your reserves, your fighting conditions. Do you actually bring up any, maybe illustrate that a little bit more for us? Because I'm so fascinated by how you're taking lessons from your work at the hospital, saving lives, or sometimes worse, not being able to save lives.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you're able to use that in this fashion in helping you overcome a massive obstacle. Can you illustrate how do you manifest that?
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. But when I'm at work and I'm working with my patients, I didn't cause what's going on with them. My whole job is to make it better. So I would approach each situation at work with the intent of making this situation a little bit better. Whether it be a mother has never touched their child because they couldn't hold them because the baby was so sick, but maybe I could have her brush the baby's hair today. Or maybe I can have her put some lip balm because the lips look chapped, or something just to make her feel like a mother. Like that was the best gift that I could give that person. And knowing that that was the takeaway made it better for them that day. It might not have changed the overall situation, but for that moment in that time, that person felt better. And when I'm on a swim like this, I mean, I thought a lot about patients that I had cared for. I had a very special patient that we fought so hard for a year, over a year. She was on a heart machine and a dialysis circuit. She finally got her kidney and heart transplant, and she ended up passing because she got an overriding sepsis. And it just crushed my soul. I loved that little girl so much. And what I learned from that was she would tell me, I don't feel good today, but maybe tomorrow I will. And I thought to myself, she's pretty profound, this little child. And so, mile after mile, when I had challenges, like there was a point when the water was so cold and I didn't think I could finish. Like I just was so overwhelmed by the cold. And I have a lot of fat reserves, and I kept yelling at my body, like, find something to burn. There's gotta be some fat cell you can find right now that could convert to energy. And I just knew that it was going to get better because it couldn't get much worse. So I think that those challenges and the things that I've learned in my profession were so profound and important in my ability to kind of keep my head in the right space to keep calm, because you waste so much energy when you get upset and flustered
Yes.
or overwhelmed. So trying to just stay calm, it was what I had to just really tell myself on a regular basis. And I had the mantra, I can do hard things. And I just kept repeating that over and over. And, it's one of those things. But honestly, I feel that if you as an individual can help just not overwhelm or have somebody be overwhelmed, it's just the best gift that you could give that person, because they're going to get clarity. You're going to get clarity. You can get through anything if you could just keep an open mind and an open heart, because that will help just guide you in so many different ways.
Amy, thanks for sharing that. Those of us who don't have, let's say, professions such as yours, I'm sensing that there are lessons we can pull from our own lives
Yeah.
that we may be blind to and apply them in a similar fashion. So, do you have any advice for us when we are facing, let's say, our own challenge on what we can draw on?
I think the best thing that I've ever done, and most people don't take the time to do, but should, is we all possess unique abilities and characteristics. And whether it be that you're an engineer, you're a scientist, you're even a teacher, like there are certain aspects to you and your job that you have to get through. And writing a list of what makes you successful in your job can help translate to what makes you successful in your accomplishments in sport. Because you would be surprised. I've seen the most incredible, like, scientists just have a very deliberate, decisive, calculated approach, and they execute it perfectly because that resonates to their soul and they can actually translate. I've seen teachers that develop great lesson plans and kind of can work with
Wow.
how all these obstacles are, and they can use that to their favor. So each profession and each way that we approach our profession has more unique attributes than most people realize. But taking the time to actually
Sure.
just sit down and write it down is your first step, because you'd be surprised at what makes you successful in your career and your profession and your passion mirror one another much more closely than most people realize.
So insightful, because yeah, that totally turns this excuse on its head when people talk about how their job is so intense or their day was difficult and that's why they couldn't bring the fire to their training session after work because they felt spent, drained, whatnot. You, however, you know, take that intensity.
Having people use their, I think people give a lot at their work, but they forget that they are equally as important. And it's okay to have a training session. Like this morning, I intended to do a lot more in the pool and I just didn't feel great. So I just listened to my body and I kind of had to back down. But I think people, if they could just appreciate that their person and their body is equally as important as their profession, they would treat it as such. And they would take their exercise and their sport to that level of showing that that's where they can also shine. I think it mirrors it's so much closer of a connection than people realize. But we also are
Amazing.
stressed out, and we got to
Yeah.
allow ourselves time to decompress, which I don't think we as a society have allowed. It's almost like people think you're lazy, but we don't give ourselves downtime like we should. But I think that long distance endurance sports is downtime because you could check out and you could think about nothing for a long time. And it's
Yes.
awesome too.
Yes. And sometimes you end up in the middle of the Pacific
Yeah,
where hopefully your phone is not working. So that's
exactly. Exactly.
one less.
Yeah. One less deadline to worry about. Oh, yeah.
Well, nearing the end of our time, maybe a couple of last questions. Amy, what advice, let's say, beyond what we have spoken about already, would you give to others who are considering, let's say, a big goal or a physical challenge, especially if they are starting later in life and may feel scared by the scale of their dream because you started later, you dreamt. What can you teach us?
I would say the first thing is the hardest step is out the door. So just going and giving it a try and giving yourself some grace. There's so much to learn when you go seek out a goal, and what you first intend to have it be might actually change into something different. So give yourself that grace and space to let that goal evolve and educate yourself. Learn from people that are already doing it, ask a lot of questions, try things. Things are going to fail, and don't be afraid of failure, because what you do when you fail at something, you actually learn 10 times more and adapt that. What can you do differently? Make yourself stronger mentally, physically, and emotionally through those failures. So, I think the best thing is to remember, if you're an older person, is that no one's going to expect you to do anything. So you might as well just blow their mind and crack them up, because that's the best. I love that.
Oh man, okay. Yes, that is true though. We are at least unburdened by the weight of societal.
Exactly. Like no one would expect somebody in their mid 50s to go out and do like the hardest swim in the world. Like who does that? And that's funny. It's really funny.
Can I ask you a fun question? So I'm guessing
Sure.
most of your loved ones were familiar with your your quest. But I'm curious, is there what may have been, let's say, the most incredulous reaction that you may have gotten that you can think about when people either heard of your planning this thing or hearing that you've accomplished this thing?
So I didn't talk about it with a lot of people. The people that are tight and close to me knew, and they also were the ones that could support my crazy. My family, I mean, we could see the Farallon Islands when they peek out on the horizon from our house. And I would always joke with my family I could swim there, and they know I can. So they would say, "Of course, mom, you could," or "Of course, honey, you can." And they would laugh. But we've been around the water so much. So they just kind of supported that. I literally didn't tell any media. I didn't tell my my cardiologist that I was working with that Friday had no idea I was doing that swim that night. And when I came back to work on Monday, I didn't even talk about it. Like they had heard about it because it went viral pretty quickly. And they were laughing because they're like, "Why don't you talk about it?" And I said, "Well, you can't put it into context. It's not something that speaks in the same way that you could appreciate or understand." And when they brought it up and it dawned on them, then we would have a great laugh about it. And, but literally, like the head cardiologist, who's the medical director of our program, had no idea. And her husband was like freaking out, saying, "Oh my God, this was incredible." And she's like, "What? She just swam to Alcatraz."
Oh,
No idea.
they didn't even get it.
No, didn't even get it. And that's
Oh
why I
man.
say, like a lot of things that people don't misperceive or just don't understand, I just find it funny because I can't make them understand when they're not ready. And I love it because I think it's so humanizing because really we could do some incredible things in life and right in front of somebody they don't see it. So that's what's the best part is just go out and do it because you're going to feel accomplished and those who need to know will know and the others they missed it. It's fine.
You're right. Sometimes it's so difficult to explain this, something which is so out of people's radar.
Yeah.
And I like to joke that there are people in my family who know that I rock climb, and they have known it for a very long time. Like I talked to my aunt, and she's like, "How was your hiking trip over the weekend?" And there's not much you can do to
No, it's funny
and
though.
it's funny. I'm just sensing, like, your hospital room, your community, because they must be like, there's no way she did this thing because she just put in this 10-hour shift
I know.
right before. Anyway, um maybe one last question, Amy. Is there something you wish you had known just earlier in your journey, reacquainting yourself with swimming again, right? That might have changed how you approached these goals.
You know, I could always think back and what if I woulda, shoulda, coulda, but I totally feel that looking at my life and looking back at my swim career now, it definitely makes all sense and it fell into the place
Mhm.
that it needed to be. I can tell you that when I was at college, my swim coach kept telling me, "You're a distance swimmer. I can't get you to aerobic capacity. I can't get you to the threshold. I've never had a swimmer like you. I don't know what to do with you." And like he overtrained me and I wasn't mentally ready for it. And I think that that failure is actually what led me to being so successful now. Because after I started getting into open water swimming, he started laughing, "Go, see, I told you, there you are." And the successes that I've accomplished this later in life are so much more meaningful than if I would have accomplished all the goals that I had set forth younger. I wasn't ready. I needed to have a little bit more dark. I needed to have a little bit more success, failure, like balance,
Mhm.
because I don't think that you become a really holistic until you
Mhm.
challenge yourself on so many different levels. And I think that it all fell into place the way it needed to. I don't have any regrets of taking 24 years off. I just think it makes it more rich.
Yeah,
It's funny.
yeah, yeah. Maybe it just drives that hunger, that
Yeah.
passion, because you didn't always have it available to you, and now that any current goals
Yeah.
that
I
you're
mean,
training for, that you
yeah.
care to share?
Yeah. I actually setting my sights for 2025 for the Straits of Juan de Fuca, so another cold water channel. It's typically about 47 degrees, and it's a 12-mile span from Port Angeles to
Mm.
Victoria, Canada. And the reason I want to do this swim is for my brother, who's battling stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He lives in West Vancouver and he looks out onto the Straits of Juan de Fuca from his home. And I'm going to do it in honor of him because even though he might not be able to physically see me, he's going to know I'm in that water just a little bit beyond his sights. And, I have the ability physically to fight in a different way, but he has to fight every day for his life. So if I could have 12 miles of some discomfort to accomplish this goal in honor of him, he was on my mind the whole way to my Farallon swim. And now another one of my brothers just got diagnosed with cancer of the same variety. And I just think that the little thing that I could do to have a successful experience with accomplishing a goal in honor of them is just what I'm aiming for right now. So that goal is coming up probably in August, maybe early September. And so I'm looking forward to that. The other is a smaller goal. My daughter just moved to Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, and I'm going to go on a lighthouse swim journey around there and blow some minds because they don't swim in Lake Michigan like I want to. So it'll be fun.
Amazing. Being able to give back in this profound way to honor and cherish the ones that are the closest, and maybe on a more fun note, to be able to, like in your words, blow people's minds
Yeah.
by doing something they would have never imagined right in their own backyard. In this example, freezing Lake Michigan.
Exactly. I can't wait. My son-in-law just was surfing Lake Michigan yesterday, and there's a small number of people that really take advantage of Lake Michigan, but
True,
he can't wait for me to get out there to show these people how to swim out there because
true.
the the top of Sturgeon Bay it is the top of Green Bay, and they call it the top of Death's Door. I
Oh,
kind of like that name. It's kind of cool. And it's between the top of the peninsula to Washington Island. They call that Death's Door because apparently it chewed up a lot of ships back in maritime early days. And there's Lake Michigan could be a very big, brawny, terrible body of water that can be really unmanageable at times. But they have this kayak race, but I'm going to swim it.
mhm. Wow.
They've never had anybody do that before, so I can't wait for that one.
I have seen footage and video of people surfing the Great Lakes
Mhm.
in the middle of
Yep.
winter, with icicles hanging off their faces.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is it done at all? Are you going to be doing something which is very rare?
You know, in the summertime, people enjoy the water, but I don't think they swim
Okay.
like I would want to swim.
I
Um,
see.
I would swim like in the winter, like they do a polar plunge in the area, things
Of
like that.
course.
But there's groups that are all over the world that are in climates just like that swim all year round. And I can't wait to meet up with more people to do that because you just have to show them and they can do it and it just
Yeah.
grows. It's just so awesome.
Amy, thanks for showing us this way. I yeah, yeah, thanks for inspiring us. Thanks for taking your time. It's been an amazing conversation. Good luck on your next upcoming big swim.
Well, I can't wait to hear what next you climb or surf or whatever you challenge. I can't wait to hear about that as well. I would celebrate that just as much as my swims and accomplishments. I love when people accomplish things they set out to do. That's my biggest, just it resonates in my soul. I just get passionate when I hear that people have accomplished things that they set out to do. So I look forward to hearing about yours.
That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ageless Athlete Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show just as much as I enjoyed creating and producing it. Whether you are an athlete looking to push your limits or someone striving to maintain a healthy, active lifestyle as you age, there is always something new to learn. From Ageless Athlete, we bring you a fresh episode each and every week. If you liked what you heard, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. And if you really liked what you heard, please leave us a review, crush those 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. It helps us reach more people who are passionate about staying strong and resilient, no matter their age. Don't forget to visit our website and leave your email so I can send you occasional insights, stories, and tips to keep you inspired and motivated on your journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Ageless Athlete Podcast and on YouTube at Ageless Athlete Podcast as well for even more great content. All of these links are available on the show notes for this episode. This show is entirely produced by me, Kush Khandelwal, based out of California with the help of my trusted adventure pup, Roger. Until next time, keep challenging yourself. Keep pushing those limits. Stay mentally and physically fit. Continue doing what you love to do. And my friends, stay ageless.